I've been doing a lot of thinking about initiative systems, especially with respect to initiative in non-combat scenarios, such as skill challenges. See my last video. This video is, as most of my discussion videos, a collection of thoughts I've had on the subject to hopefully prompt some interesting discussions and thoughts in the comments below. So, as any good video essay, let's start by trying to build a good definition of an initiative system. As I see it, an initiative system is a rule set, which determines who the focus lands on, for how long, and who it moves to next. It's a system for moving the spotlight around the players at the table. It's very closely tied to ideas of action economy. It is generally a tool for turn-based gameplay, which is a fundamental component of most TTRPGs, mainly because you don't want to have multiple people talking at the same time. It is sort of a systematization of just good social etiquette. So, to synthesize a working definition, initiative systems are rules for determining which participant in a turn-based scenario acts next, and for how long. So to be clear, I am including both the order of events, what is typically covered by the initiative check, and the amount of stuff you can do on your turn as all part of the initiative system. I really like thinking about initiative systems in terms of a spotlight. I think it helps divorce the concept from just combat, which is typically the only time when such systems are used. But as I said above, we actually use a sort of implicit initiative system all the time in regular play. Whenever the game master turns and addresses the player who hasn't had a chance to do anything yet, and directly puts the spotlight on them, they are effectively using social skills as an initiative system. I could, I think, make the argument that table etiquette is an initiative system, although perhaps the system bit would be in inverted commas. At a communicative and healthy table, everyone recognizes that we are all here to have a good time, and we should make sure that everyone gets a chance to contribute to scenes if they would like to, and that in some scenes, certain players may be more of a focus than in others, such as a scene the GM has specifically prepared to link into someone's backstory. So why do games feel the need to design complex rules for combat? Why not just use the etiquette system all the time, if it works well enough for narrative scenes and exploration? In truth, some do. If you've only ever played the D20 family of games, it may feel a bit unnatural, but plenty of games are much looser about combat, and treat it more like any other type of scene. I think the most well-known example would probably be Blades in the Dark, or any other Powered by the Apocalypse type game. But they aren't that hard to find, and these games work really well. In general, such games are much more narrative-focused, and allow the players and game master to work collaboratively to craft the story. So perhaps we should be asking the other question: what are the reasons for using a structured initiative system? I think one of the main reasons is etiquette is a great system, but it assumes you have a table where everyone is really aware of social graces, which is not a guaranteed thing, even at regular tables. Sometimes you come to the table emotionally drained, and just can't focus as well as you'd like to, or maybe you have difficulties tuning into that social network. A rule system for sharing the spotlight helps take the emotional load off the game master and the players, and ensures that even when tired or in a bit of a mood, everyone still gets a chance to do something, and you don't have to fight to get a word in. Another reason to use structured initiative systems is because it can be a lot of fun. Lots of people play TTRPGs specifically for the tactical, crunchy gameplay, thinking about how best to utilize their action economy. I am particularly fond of a character I played in a Greek mythology-inspired D&D campaign called Aracles, who is specifically built around jumping on top of other creatures to body slam them using the rules in Tasha's, effectively meaning I could weaponize my movement. It was a ton of fun. If you're building a tactical game, and not necessarily just tactical combat, you can add this level of crunch to any part of the game, seriously consider how an initiative system can enhance these types of interesting choices in character creation and in gameplay. And that brings me neatly on to, I think, the next main reason to use an initiative system. Players spend a lot of time building their characters, and the more time they spend building certain parts of their character, the more invested they will be in actually using those aspects. Again, this isn't just a combat thing. If you spend hours writing a detailed backstory, it will be a bit disappointing if the Game Master never does anything with it, and you never get a chance in a roleplay scene to demonstrate that character depth. If there are parts of the game where people are going to invest in during character creation, an initiative system for those parts of play will ensure that they get to do their thing. They will have some confidence that they will get to use this feature, because they know they'll get X many actions or whatever in those situations. The final reason to use a structured initiative system is perhaps the most obvious. Strict tracking of actions almost certainly means tracking time, which can be really important for certain situations. This might be why combat so often uses a strict initiative, as there is a built-in timer. You need to do something before the monsters kill you. So, if there's a part of your game where the timeline is really important, consider using an initiative system. Okay, so to summarize, I think these are the main reasons to use a formal initiative system. It provides a standard experience regardless of table etiquette. It can provide tactical depth. It gives players confidence that their investment will be paid off. And it provides a means of tracking time and making an understandable timeline. On the other hand, if the timeline doesn't matter, or there's only a few active participants, maybe because not everyone has invested in this type of scene, and therefore there is less risk of players speaking over each other, and you are looking for a more narrative experience, you may be best relying simply on the etiquette system, or something similarly light. Why do I say this? Well, there's a bit of a double-edged sword to building tactical rule sets, especially for initiative, and that's as much fun as people have optimizing and calculating their best options. The consequences can be that the people who don't enjoy optimization, or just aren't as good at it, end up with less impactful use of their action economy, and basically end up playing the game less than everyone else, which, needless to say, feels really bad. This is why you need to be really careful about initiative systems in particular, where there are lots of ways to manipulate or gain more action economy, as it's incredibly powerful. There is a reason why people say action economy is king, and initiative checks are really important. In D&D, there is a reason why nobody wants to have a low dexterity, and a good chunk of that, I think, is going earlier in initiative. If you can take out a monster before they get a turn, you're cruising for an easy victory. But how does that make the low dex paladin feel if by the time it gets to their turn, half the fight is already finished? Similarly, you need to be really careful about conditions which limit action economy. You're stunned, paralyzed, confused, etc. When using a strict initiative system, these conditions become a "you don't get to play the game now" button. On the subject of being able to build a character for initiative systems, such as tying an ability score to part of the system, I think there is a fundamental conflict at play between character fantasy and game balance. I think we can all appreciate the fantasy of playing a character who is quick and adaptable, can think quickly, launch a flurry of attacks, has lightning-fast reflexes, the classic cowboy gunslinger, or that one scene from Sherlock where he gets shot and quickly calculates the best possible action in the fraction of a second. There's a whole array of characters for whom their power comes from their action speed rather than their strength or their accuracy or something. The trouble is that it's almost unavoidable in a turn-based game that any increase to action economy can wildly throw the game out of balance, and not just in ways that make the life of the game master harder, but in ways that can negatively impact the feeling at the table. If in D&D dexterity not only increased your initiative check, but also let you take more actions on a turn, we can all see that this would quickly cause a problem. And as described above, combat is particularly vulnerable, because basically all players spend time in character creation investing in their combat abilities. We don't mind so much when the bard does a lot more than everyone else in a social scene, because the barbarians and rangers of the world didn't invest into charisma and charisma skills. This does, I think, mean that there are certain character archetypes that, for the sake of game balance, are going to be somewhat limited in their manifestations. But I don't think you're totally out of luck. The way I see it, there are two main ways to make action economy boosts work in a TTRPG. The first is to tie it to some limited use ability. To keep using D&D as the main cultural touchstone, Action Surge allows you to be able to do more than everyone else. But it doesn't feel bad, because we all understand that it's basically single use. Admittedly, this does water down the fantasy somewhat, but it does maintain game balance. The other way to make it work, I think, is to have something the Game Master has a means of countering in certain combat scenes. For example, one way that all players can effectively gain better action economy is to be a ranged attacker. If it takes the melee fighters an extra turn or two to get within stabbing range, that's one whole extra turn the ranged fighters get to do something meaningful towards the goal. On the other hand, the Game Master can design a combat which takes place in close quarters battlefield, full of cover, and now it's the ranged users that are having to waste their action economy climbing to high ground in order to get a shot off, while the marshals can dive straight in. This way, the GM can decide which players they want to highlight, and whether to allow your general boost to initiative from scene to scene. And this doesn't necessarily break the character fantasy, as it makes narrative sense that, for example, in this scene with a distracting noise, your typically quick-thinking character is thrown off. This is why I think that my system for initiative in the Verve works in this respect. For those who aren't aware, the flow system is sort of a hybrid action point single action system, where each participant is given a flow value between 0 and 9, which represents their level of preparedness. This value rolls over from round to round. Participants perform one action per round, starting with those on a flow of 9, down to those with a flow of 0. Each action either costs flow or gains flow. Generally speaking, actions which directly impact the main goal of the scene cost flow, while waiting or moving type actions gain flow. And critically, the wait or prepare actions, in which you do nothing, typically gains 2 plus intelligence flow. This means having a higher intelligence score gives you a boost to your action economy, as it takes fewer wait actions per each main action. However, this benefit only applies if you're doing the least impactful action. You are paying a reasonable cost to gain this benefit. And if the Game Master, called a conductor, wants to run a game where this benefit is countered, they can design a fight where you're heavily punished for standing still, forcing people to use the move or dash actions instead. Not to mention, if you are focusing primarily on increasing your intelligence, you will have much less movement speed, stamina, and morale than your allies, and so will be limited in what you can do in other ways. I think that there are enough balanced dials available that this doesn't become overpowered, but does provide a way to play the fantasy of the quick-thinking, fast reactions character seen in so much media. No system is perfect, of course, so I'd love to hear your thoughts and your own initiative systems in the comments below. There's a bunch of other discussions around action economy and initiative systems that I couldn't quite fit into this video, which I'm sure we can have in the comments. Or I'm also reachable on the Tales from Elsewhere Discord server, whose YouTube channel I will link to here and in the description. It was partially discussions on that server that prompted me to make this video. I will at some point set up my own Discord server if there is enough interest. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and hit subscribe, as I have lots more videos in the works. Thanks for watching.